Great, right on. Well, Malia, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and just give Kirk a really brief introduction, the best that I can from my lived experience. So Kirk is my teacher's teacher, or one of my teacher's teacher. So I had initially reached out to Darren Doherty, who has done a lot of broad scale work. It's hard to describe everything that Darren does. I've just kind of put it in the broad category of regenerative agriculture. But he's somewhat of a polymath, and he pulls from holistic management, from PA Yeoman's keyline farming, and from many other sort of modalities that are developed by practitioners. And so when I reached out to Darren, his instinct was, you need to talk to Kirk. He's my teacher. He's also worked in Hawaii. And so that is how Kirk and I met. And with that brief introduction, I'll get out of the way and turn it over to you, Malia.
Mahalo nui, Matt. And for those who don't know Matt, he's my permaculture brother and UH sustainability director. And I'm very grateful to you, Matt, for linking us up with Kirk. And just to introduce myself, Kirk, my name is Malia Akuragawa from the island of Molokai. Um, I'm a board member and founder of Sustainable Molokai, and some of my Sustainable Molokai nonprofit people are here, Harmony Williams and Christopher O'Brien. We also have here Glenn Teves, who's UH College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources Extension Agent, Molokai Hawaiian Homesteader. We have Malu Castro, who's of the Meyer Ohana. They hold about 2,000 acres of land on Molokai, and they want to be able to manage it better, and they also may have some deer issues. Jonah Hoshino is my law student who will be taking notes for us, and he's also a hunter. Um, Marshall Joy is with UHCTAR and working on farm to school kind of initiatives. Um, and then we just wanted to kind of hear from your wisdom as to, is it possible to actually manage the deer in a way to direct their movement and flow that could have a healing effect on the land. Right now, we're having a lot of deer infiltrate into homestead farms and are pretty much bankrupting our farmers, eating a lot of crops. We have an issue of genetics being affected in our deer population, in that younger hunters are just hunting for trophies. And so that wild instinct that the deer have is being lost, and they're coming a lot into the residences, and there's overpopulation with too much does mating with spikes, like substandard kind of males. So it's affecting the gene pool. And then we've had prolonged drought with overpopulation, basically a perfect storm happening, and a lot of vegetation is being denuded. And we have some private landowners that have been more like absentee landowners, like Molokai Ranch, and they've shut off the water in certain areas that also cause a lot of distress to the animals. We also have ranchers with deer going onto their pastures and affecting the ability of ranchers to have viable cattle population. And we have our own livestock cooperative and slaughterhouse, and we want to be able to provide grass-fed organic beef of a high quality for our ranchers. And then there are also venison being processed through the slaughterhouse as well. So we're looking at a myriad of issues, and how to how do we utilize this so-called invasive species that has been with us for over 200 years and become such an important part of our subsistence diet and culture. So we're trying to find a perfect balance of how do we restore our native forests from being denuded by these ungulates that did not formerly exist on our islands. How do we continue to preserve the venison and goat and pigs as part of our culture and our uh, major protein source, while preserving our reefs, which has fish and our major protein source for us as well, and the seaweed, marine life, everything. So given your knowledge in holistic management, can we utilize some of these techniques and bring it to bear? And if so, then my nonprofit and others here in this room would probably want to work with you to bring the resources in to assist you to come here and help us with that. And then also Uncle Sal Kaho'ohalahala is here. He's from the island of Lanai, and they also have issues with the deer. And he's he's a Hawaiian conservationist as well as a hunter and fisherman. So a lot of us here on Molokai, we live a very subsistence lifestyle as well as Lanai. So this is who we are, and we just now want to just hear from you. So mahalo, thank you so much for being here with
Okay. Mahalo for inviting me. Um, I really appreciate it. And maybe I can give you a little background on myself. And so I've been involved with holistic management for close to 30 years. I've had the opportunity to travel widely, working with people on the land and applying those principles, but mainly with livestock. Uh, but many of those properties also have a lot of game. I've worked in the state of Hawaii for probably over 25 years, also mainly on Maui, Big Island, um, and on Molokai for several years. I worked with Puhoku Ranch and the manager at the time, Jack Spruance, who's currently managing the cooperative. And I keep in touch with Jack probably once a month or so. So I'm kind of real familiar with the deer issue there. When we were trying to reestablish pastures at Puhoku, the deer were a major issue. Following the rotation of the cattle, they would come in, particularly with the pangola grass, which is their favorite. They would mow it. So we had a very hard time getting the recovery periods that we needed and those kind of things. So it was a problem even, many years ago, but not to the level now. And so Jack has filled me in, where he is on the east end, and his wife is a, um, farmer there for crops, ginger and other things that she grows biodynamically. Until he put up a deer fence there, he was trying to just cut halikoa and make one barrier for them, but every night they would find some way through that barrier. So until he put up the fence, now they have their farm back. And the same with his cattle pastures. He's had to put up the fence in order to get the recovery periods. So I'm also have dealt with the problem there on Maui, mainly with Upalakua, Haleakala Ranch, were the two biggest ones that have had issues. And now Mahipono, which is the farming that took over from, the cane once it went out. And they've been using, I think you guys have used also Jake Muse, but they have more of an eradication focus for that farm and trying to get rid, whereas on the ranches, they're trying to manage it somewhat similar to you, but their livelihoods are the livestock. And so they have to create some kind of balance. But same thing, I go hunt deer when I'm there. I'm a hunter here. So a lot of those issues are familiar with me too. And the two things you said that stand out is current situation, perfect storm. and where you want to go, perfect balance. So kind of hard to, just switch places without a magic wand on that one. And all those things, but I think particularly the drought is the overriding factor. And but all the factors you mentioned, and I have had a chance to read through a lot of the materials that you put on Dropbox and recognize all the very hard work that you've already put into this, and particularly that deer management plan. And I got to ask, that's got to be one stuffed deer on the front of that one. Or at least looks like it. But I thought, that's really good work. I think it gives you a really good basis for going forward. And Malia, to kind of answer your question, my experience in dealing with wild game populations is the reason that they herd up and move to different areas and provide recovery and so on is because of predation. And, no natural predators in the state there. So except, wild dogs or whatever, but humans is the one. So, and what you're trying to do with your plan seems to focus on, getting us predators to have a coordinated and focused approach to bringing that wildness back, bringing them out from the areas that they would naturally be afraid of, which is the homes and people, and away from, the very top, the watershed. Been up there and, they don't go into moss rainforest usually. They have that zone from the, Molokai when it rains, and then Mauka up to a certain point. That's their major range. And so when they're going to everywhere else, they're starving. And so at least I think that you're on the right track with what you're doing. Getting that level down is going to be a major task, and changing somewhat the focus of harvesting those mature bucks, because we have the same thing here on the mainland. But a lot of places are required. If you shoot one buck, you got to shoot 3 does, and it's a requirement when people go. And I think the mindset of changing, to the biggest animal male, to we're doing something for the Aina here that's going to really affect our whole island and our culture and everything, can be brought in. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to build. So I applaud you for your efforts so far on that. And it seems to me that you're on the right track. I don't think there's any magic in holistic management. I do know and have had, just innumerable experience where the management of land so that it gets a recovery period. Grazing is not a bad thing, be it by wildlife or cattle or whatever. What is bad is continuous exposure of the land to animals where it doesn't get to recover. And so if we don't have a potential for recovery, then the effect is always going to be negative. I have very seldom seen unmanaged grazing be a positive effect on the land, but it can be a positive effect if we can manage it. So that, I think that's the challenge, be it for the livestock, the ranches there, and theirs was probably, I guess, 8-9 years ago, I ran a holistic management course on Molokai. We did have Jimmy Dugashell that came to that. As far as I know, they never implemented anything there. I know that Emerson Makikau, probably some of you guys know Emerson, just left there. I'm not sure where he's going now, but I know him as an extremely good manager of livestock. So I don't know the story on that. But he is a valuable resource. He's from Molokai, and he's one of the best livestock persons that I know. So there's some resources there. And also, I feel like Jack, he's been through the training. When he was managing Puhoku, that place was really producing. I mean, we would drive through guinea grass up over the Kubota in almost all the paddocks. And I understand it's not that way anymore. And that the koa, Formosa koa, and that is taken over. And even the haole koa now is just being stripped by the deer, and they rub them, they ride them down, and so one by one everything is happening. So maybe that's enough for now, and maybe I can hear from other folks and give me a deeper perspective while I got everybody. So mahalo.
Mahalo, Kirk. I, you know, the vision that I got, and honestly, I'm just gonna rat myself out that I get certain like visions from from the ancestors showing me certain things. So one of the things was how fish ponds were built, and it was basically learning the habits of certain herbivorous fish and providing the habitat by which they would be attracted so that they would never leave. And that's how we got this constant source of protein from our fish ponds. So many years ago, as I was pondering this question and asking for guidance, the kupuna showed me that we needed to make fish pond on land, like to study the habits of the deer and fulfill their needs and then guide their flow along the landscape. And so I got really attracted to permaculture and holistic management and the mimicking of the herds across the African savanna, and that they were able to aerate the soil and fertilize the soil through this high density movement through the landscape. So I'm wondering if we could, like within that zone you said described as the true habitat of the deer, if we can kind of flow their movement through these areas, if by planting certain things that they like to eat, providing water and whatever minerals that they need. I don't know if you need salt licks or whatever, but how can we guide them through these areas? And maybe I'm thinking making gabions in streams and maybe fencing up the upper rainforest and restoring that. But is there a certain zone that we can keep them and move through the landscape in a way that is healing, while also making sure that our cattle ranchers are provided for and they're managing properly? So my interest is to train, to have like your training and provide it for a lot of our people here, and then possibly doing some kind of pilot project maybe on one of the large landowners lands, and see if we can actually do this and then replicate it if successful. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, and everybody else in this Zoom, what they think of that possibility. I want to see if we can demonstrate that it works.
I can add to some of that. First of all, thanks, Kirk, for your background. I think I've worked with Jack for over 20 years, so I know what he can do, and his whole thing about focusing on the grass is really critical and something that few people do in Hawaii. Um, the I'm a homestead farmer. I grow all kind of vegetables and stuff, and also work with the livestock industry. I worked with the slaughterhouse and developing the slaughterhouse. What's happening on the land right now is like it's going to take a long time bringing it back. I mean, I see in my place, I can see where the deer hang out because that's the area where there's nothing on the ground. All the plants are gone, so I can find spots where I know they just hung out at night. Um, we have lantana, Formosa koa, blue thistle, and balloon plant coming on like gangbusters, and we're gonna have to figure out how to get those guys under control. We're just gonna take over the whole homestead in a very short time. Um, the other thing I noticed is that the deer are kind of disoriented, probably from a lot of different things. One is eating poisonous plants. Um, they're eating just about anything. They're not touching Formosa coa. They're not touching lantana. Um, but they're eating Christmas berry, which is like, that's the extreme. When you start eating Christmas berry, you know you got a problem. And yeah, the killing the haole. And what's happening now is you can actually see into people's homesteads, and in the past you couldn't do that because of
Right.
the thin of the plants. Um, and this thing about the deer being really disoriented is really interesting, because instead of seeing the large herds, now you see smaller groups. Sometimes you see just an individual spike on its own. The other day I was on a Zoom meeting and I heard this commotion. I think it saw me, and this little spike just ran right into my truck in my yard. Um, and so you see these individual animals running around just kind of disoriented, and it kind of tells you that their whole family system is falling apart.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think we got a lot to talk about, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Very helpful. Well, I would maybe just comment that, with those behaviors and all the other things that I'm hearing and reading in some of your reports and stuff, the level has gone beyond, where I think you're going to have to really manage that population and get it in balance with the ability of the land to recover and grow something besides, rubbish type of plants that nothing will eat, typically have thorns or, other toxins, and, don't provide for any kind of habitat, and particularly for native birds, and, all the things that, but I think the biggest single one is watershed. And those fish ponds and stuff that have been there for, immemorial times and now silted up, and you you can see it, and feel it when you're losing the soil from the land. That's when it's bleeding, and really, literally on Molokai, that red soil is like blood when it's leaving the land. And if we don't get cover back on the ground, then it's going to take so long for that soil to regenerate. Um, in a normal type climate, assuming we get get that back again. I mean, I've been through several cycles of really bad drought when I work with ranchers in the state, and one of the difficulties there is there's no sale barn. You can ship the calves, but you can't ship the cows. There's no market, but it costs you more to ship them than not. So you got to try and save those animals if you possibly can. And with the deer, I guess there's some market with local and that with the slaughterhouse and stuff. And I guess Jake has, I don't know, is Jake working there with you guys? Jake Muse? No, okay. Well, I'm familiar with what he does there on Maui mostly. They have a portable slaughterhouse, and they go night shooting and harvest deer. One of their big products is dog food that they market on the mainland, high-end dog food. And then they do get from Honolulu, they get the state inspectors to come out some nights because they have to physically be present when the deer is shot in the head at night, and then they can market those for human food, high end. And as you know, Axis deer to me is the best tasting venison there is, really good. And so there's quite a market for it commercially, but boy, how difficult is it? You have to fly inspectors in from, Honolulu, and they have to be there all night, and everything, you got to shoot them right in the head. So you need that high-tech equipment, forward-looking infrared radar and all that stuff to shoot those animals 300, 400, 500 yards out. And so they just go down and don't run off. So you can really make a harvest. And so I've seen some of the videos that they do, and I know, at Mahi Pono there at Maui, they've just on that former cane land where they're now planting crops and stuff, they did an inventory and over 6,000 deer just on that Molokai area where those cane fields used to be. And a lot of that burnt a couple years ago. They had a huge fire there, over 10,000 acres burned. And so the deer, moved out and went up to the ranches and homesteads and stuff. So they've been doing a lot of efforts for control, but I know the ranches, mainly Haleakala and Ulupalakua and Ka'unu'ulu, they're putting up deer fence, and Mahi Pono is also putting up deer fence because they don't know what else to do. Then they will have areas that they can manage the population, that if they get the population down, it doesn't just come back in from someplace that's unmanaged. So that's sort of the approach that they feel like they've got to use. And part of the problem is they have great grazing with the cattle in the paddocks that they have. A lot of those ranches have over 50 different paddocks that they move the cattle through. But if the deer are going to follow right after them, that kind of ruins their whole rotation too, if the numbers aren't kept down. So again, I think you have to focus, as you are doing, on that, getting that population in balance with the land and what it can produce, so that we start to see that coming back, in a nutshell.
I just wanted to comment on that. The regulations have changed somewhat. You can, ranchers can get, hunters can get certified, so that inspectors don't have to go with them.
Okay, great.
So there's still some headshots, broadside, not from the front. So
Okay.
no chance of, bullets in the, and there doesn't seem to be too much regulation in terms of how many hours, as long as the animal gets there in a good condition. So it's kind of that allow for, say, Pohoku to get the deer to our house. So that door is open. They just got to get certified, which I think is good. It's a good idea. Because in the past we had to do, the inspector coming out, and if the deer are not there, you just paid for that guy from Honolulu to Molokai and back, and it becomes very costly. So that kind of helps. The fencing is something that we're looking at, because some of the farmers got wiped out already. And we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with the emergency management people, and one of the things I brought up was fencing of the watershed, and also expansion of the watershed because of the present conditions. And they were really open to that, of expanding the watershed, because the watershed needs to be zero tolerance. It never was, and right now the deer are actually way up in the deep of the forest, right on some of the rims of some of our North Valleys. So you can't get any closer than that. And so it's thinning out, creating more prairie up there. And it's going to be a long-term impact in terms of capturing the water up in the mountains. So that to me is a real high priority. The other thing that was being proposed was from Molokai Ranch to fence their highest areas and try to develop forest up there as well, which I think is a really good idea. It's not a new one. We've talked about it many times, but we have a landowner that is not really committed to anything. And when you have control of 60,000 acres, that becomes a real problem. And it really doesn't matter what everybody else does, but if they don't do anything, they just add to the problem, fourfold or more.
Well, that's very helpful and heartening to hear that they've relaxed some of those, harvest laws, so that, because I think, commercially, if you can give those things a value and allow people to make money from it too. And that's one of the things I saw throughout was, we're not wanting to exterminate vermin here. We want these animals to benefit the people. Well, you mentioned it right through what you said too. It's become a way of life for people, and a protein source that's huge. And so you're not trying to exterminate them, but maybe there's more than people can eat, at least on island. So
Yes.
if there's a way to expand that market, and put a profit motive there, that's what motivates people. And is there a way to do that will help the communities and the people, while doing what you need to for population management? Yeah.
In other deer meetings that I've had with Glenn and others, we talked about, like, we want to bring the population down, but we don't want to waste the meat. So we're also looking at slaughterhouse, and then my nonprofit, Sustainable Molokai. We have this food hub, mobile market, and we've been very critical in the COVID response here on Molokai, and feeding 1,000 families every 2 weeks through food bank. So what we've discussed, Glenn and some others in our different groups, are talking about how do we just process some of these deer through the slaughterhouse, make them into ground venison, and utilize the food bank to distribute to the families. So yeah, we're trying to figure out all these things, and I think we're gonna have to purchase more freezer space too, because we don't want to waste the meat as we're
Yeah.
bringing the population down. Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, Kirk, is the ranchers gotta put fencing and the farmers gotta put fencing for the deer. We gotta protect the watershed, bring the deer out of those sensitive watershed areas.
Yeah.
And once we get the population down to a little bit more sustainable levels, um, and have the land recover a bit more, then possibly we could look at also managing the deer through holistic management processes. Could we begin to actually try and do some of that? Where ranching and deer running through the land can happen in tandem. Like, is that possible?
Given that some thought, and I think there is possible, but we need to be able to, move deer, and so that the area that they go to has recovered, and the area that they're leaving is going to recover. And when they have the ability to go wherever they want, whenever they want, I don't know how that happens. There's a new technology out there for livestock. It's just becoming available, which is a ear tag or a collar that's GPS based. I don't know about you. I hate fencing. I hate it, especially deer fence. It's ugly. It's maintenance. It's cost. It's for people that are going to go and they have to jump a fence or whatever, a deer fence, they're going to cut it. And so you got all the issues with fence. I hate it, but I please give me an alternative. The livestock thing is going to be a GPS base, so that when the animals approach it, they hear an audible beep that increases with frequency and volume as they get closer. So it's beep, 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 beep. And if they get too close, they get a shock in a very sensitive part of the anatomy, the ear. And so they recognize that noise only takes one, possibly two times, and they avoid that. And it's just a line drawn with a GPS. There's no fence there. If something like that was available for the deer, and we could capture them and have it, then we'd have that type of control. But you know, it's just now becoming available for livestock even. So maybe the future in the horizon is something like that. Again, technology maybe come to the answer, but right now protecting that upper watershed, I can't see much. You know, and I've seen it on Maui and the Big Island where they've put in the fences to keep either the sheep or the cattle, the goats in particular are the worst. And magically, the koa regenerates. Magically, all those native plants just regenerate. You don't have to go plant them. The seeds are there. You just got to keep those animals out from that area and they come back. It's going to take longer if you've lost the soil. So I don't think that's happening in those upper watersheds now. You guys know a lot more than me, but if you can prevent that from happening, because a lot of the rain that comes there is made by the forest itself, right? In those type of environments, just from the transpiration, they call it. So the leaves and the moss and stuff just release that moisture into the air, and they recycle it. And they say over 50% of the rain in a rainforest is coming from the vegetation itself, not just the uplift of the trades, against the mountain. So if you get to the point where there's not the vegetation anymore, you're going to lose that watershed. It will regenerate, but be very much more difficult if you've lost the base of it. So if there's a critical place first, it's probably that upper watershed that's just now being invaded. But I really don't like the option. I have to say that.
Do you have any thoughts, Uncle Saul? Uncle Saul from Lanai. I know you've done fencing, and Lanai has a lot of issues as well with the deer.
Well, I think I appreciate listening in on some of your experiences and some of your suggestions. I think the island of Lanai is really an example of the conflict that we've had over decades with an animal that has had no real checks. And we are over 40, 50 years in decline now. We're a smaller island. We don't have running streams. Our watershed is being inundated. It's being eaten away as we speak. And so I think a lot of the ideas that you're talking about and trying to figure out how you might manage an animal like this are going to be ideas that I think you develop as you manage. But for me, bottom line is that the animals have taken over every part of our island, Lanai, to the point that we see them in herds of hundreds to thousands, at a time. Walking across the streets, cars have to wait until they finish crossing, unheard of. So unless, we decide that these animals have to have some kind of carrying capacity when they're confined to islands. These are not island animals. And so when you have a population that high, that need to eat every single day, that an island's capacity to feed them is what we are challenged with, because by that act of feeding this animal, we are diminishing our ability to live on Lanai. So when we have no more watershed, unable to recover, our sediment has covered the entire island itself. And what do you do? It's too late perhaps. So I think we should have paid a little bit more attention to that decades ago. And as a result, we've tried to live with this idea that, it's okay, we're subsistence, gatherers, and we can live on an island with this animal. And no one checked to see that the population was getting out of hand. And then with climate change, I mean, we've had periods of drought for over 10 years at a stretch. And Lanai had animals dead all over the place because we couldn't feed the numbers of animals that the island has to support. And yeah, now we get some rain back and everything seems to be okay. And it's not, you know, so we cannot live with this idea that we will be able to manage them unless you really take care of the population first. And once you've decided what a population base this an island can support, then I think we can talk about how you want to manage them in terms of subsistence food and how you're going to manage all of that over time. But you know, Lanai is critical right now. And that's why, you know, everything you've said, been there, done that, you know. So for me at this point, when the herd size is well over 20, probably nearing 30,000 animals on the island of Lanai, we don't have the luxury of talking about how we're gonna create, you know, luxury dining experiences. No, because that only takes care just of a minute population base that you know, for economic reasons, we're going to keep a herd size at 20, 30,000 so that we can feed a few luxury meals. No, it doesn't work that way because the island is going to die. And that is, to me, the more critical part about what we need to do and be serious about. So I think, you know, that's where I'm looking, is that we have to acknowledge. I mean, the most recent survey was done, I think, 2 years ago. And this is by the landowner's own survey, an estimation of population over 20,000, you know, for the island of Lanai. We've seen deer in the island, in the community that we have never, ever seen before, ever in my life on Lanai, in places we never seen, in herd sizes we've never seen. And, you know, so it's kind of a curiosity. You know, some people are amazed. Oh, wow, we get to watch all these thousands of deer crossing the road, and oh, wow, we take photos of them. You know, and I'm thinking, wow, so that's an indication of how we have come to accept this kind of condition, and yet the seriousness of this condition in time is going to be a detriment to the island's ability to support its own people. So what's more important, you know? I think we got to be serious about that. And I would hold the landowner responsible for this, because the landowner has been part of the problem in helping this population to expand to the point that, you know, it becomes a luxury kind of big game trophy hunting experience that is for them, you know, big profit dollars to their island, but for only a few, you know, and for what? For a trophy buck. And in the meantime, the population continues to rise with an island that cannot grow, and we have to feed all of these animals. So yeah, we're in serious condition right now. So I'm more interested in us trying to figure out now how to really manage an island. And first thing is to take down the population. You know, whatever we determine is a sustainable number in herd size, it has to be achieved immediately. We don't have the luxury of saying we're going to phase this over 10 years, 20 years. No, we've already let it go for 50 years. So we don't have the luxury of time. So if we play that kind of game, then I think that Lanai will be irrecoverable in terms of how we're gonna make water to continue to survive on the island of Lanai. So and that's just my experience on Lanai, and that's where I think we are at now, and we got to be more serious about what we're going to do. So, yeah. And then I hope that we serve as a model for the rest of Maui Nui. You know, Molokai, your island is much bigger than Lanai. You have taller mountains. You have watershed areas that you have had the luxury of for generations. Lanai is not that place. You know, we're in the lee of Maui and Molokai. We get less rain. You talk about the mesic forest, we depend on clouds to make water for our island, So and the plants that attract those clouds to make the water are disappearing. So when they had no plants to make water for the island, what do? We go get bottled water. So so you see, it's much more serious than I think we have the luxury of time to talk story about. It's already beyond that. And so so the landowner needs to be responsible. If they claim that they are owners of 99%, 98% of the island, then they are responsible for the animals that they have on their island, and they are part of the solution, and they cannot shirk that kind of responsibility, okay? And so they need to be held accountable. The state of Hawaii needs to also kick in, because why? Because these animals have had an impact on the ocean resources of which we subsist. So the ocean reefs are being covered with lepo, dirt, mud, continuously. Now our ocean water is always chocolate brown, never used to be. So whose responsibility is that? It's the state. And do they go in and enforce that kind of destruction? No, no, they don't do anything. So you see, so we have to kick in and say, all of the government agencies that have authorities on this kind of condition have to be tough and have to be responsible to making enforcement happen. So when do we start? How long do we have to acknowledge the fact that it's in decline? Well, is 50 years not long enough? So we get another 50 years to just sit on it? No. So I feel that urgency, and that's why I'm expressing myself. But if you do not look at Lanai as a model of destruction from this kind of condition, then you're not going to be free of that same situation. It's just a matter of time that you're going to be in no different a situation than we are right now.
Well, I feel the passion of your story, and it has a lot of weight in what you say there. Because, I mean, what you just said, a model of destruction, wow, we don't need to see that. And so helping each other with these two things on a broader front, and obviously, the only, I guess, Hawaii did not get, the deer were brought over, but they got them. And that was that guy I mentioned, Jake. They finally found him in a cave by the ocean, a lava tube. They found him. So they got rid of him, but it could have been the next place because people wanted to bring him. So, the situation is ever more serious than you can imagine. And that was just a very moving, to me, story that adds the weight here to where you guys are going. Anything else that I could add at this point? That was really important for me to hear that. Thank you, Saul, for sharing that with us. And I'll be happy to, we talked about an education component at some point. I don't think right now is the right time for that, because the urgency of action in implementing your plan for reduction of numbers seems to be critical. And you're not going to let it go beyond the subsistence level for people, and it's a different situation there on Lanai. But if it's not started to get going here pretty soon, there's going to be real issues. So,
if I can just add one more comment, is that we had a similar situation in one of our islands in Maui Nui, and that was the island of Kaho'olawe. Kaho'olawe was the example of total disregard for management of an island. We allow the animals to escalate in populations and numbers far beyond what the island was able to manage. And aside from that, we bombed the crap out of the island, to add to injury, So when Kaho'olawe finally decided that it needed to begin to heal the island, they went for full eradication, and we had a lot of concerns about that. But I will say this much, that when given an opportunity to heal and take away all of those kinds of what do you want to call them, agents of destruction and detriment, take them away, the island will heal. And I think Kaho'olawe now is a better place than she was 20 years ago, okay? But it's going to take time to recover. So unless we take a look at our own islands in the same manner and implement what we think is necessary so that the island can regain its ability to take care of its people and its resources, then that's what we must do. So don't forget that Kaho'olawe was that place. Lanai is that place now.
Molokai could be next. That's what you're saying.
I wanna thank all of you guys for being here and sharing all your wisdom, and lots to think about in terms of our response. But this has helped me to understand that, we gotta get the deer population down, and we gotta protect our watershed. So I'm seeing what the priorities are, what goes first, second, third, and then we gotta create some economic opportunities that's also gonna attract, bringing the population down. And then once it's to a sustainable level, we can look at things like holistic management. So I just want to thank you, Kirk, for being here with us. And I think as an island, we're gonna discuss more how we do those things step by step. You wanted to say something, Glenn?
Yeah, at one of the other meetings, I mentioned that we got about a 3-month window before the thing gets worse than it ever was before. And, in this, and I agree, like, the fencing is not the solution. I mean, fencing does nothing to bring the population down. It just protects the ones that have fences. I mean, as a farmer, I want to fence my area just so that, because I believe it's going to take a long time to deal with this problem. We got a lot of obstacles, and we're part of the obstacles too. And we need to, I mean, what Saul is saying is so true. I mean, if we don't get over there and get the population down, the land is going to take a long time to recover. I mean, Molokai, I can see it already. You want to raise cattle, you're going to have to replant all your pastures. The pasture will not come back. It's going to come back with Christmas berry, lantana, and everything else that you don't want. So the land is going to have to be redone. We're going to have to redo all these areas. And so that is going to take a while. I mean, to get the animals under control on Molokai is going to take a while. It's not going to take 1 year. It's way more than that. So we need to be realistic about what we're dealing with. And I agree that we need to have economic opportunities for people, because this will be a driver. And I know some people are really against that, but we have no choice. We have to do something like right now.
Well, I'm gonna also just express my thank you for being invited. I'll be glad to help however I can in the future. And this was a really powerful session for me in getting a real feel. Besides reading the papers, you see the people. I've been there. I know the vegetation. I know I've seen gradually what goats and deer and cattle too can do if not managed correctly. So I look forward to staying in touch with your progress. Aloha to all of you, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kirk.
Hello.
Okay, gang, we get our work cut out for us. That's what it sounds like. Yeah. So
One of the big problems we're dealing with right now is no more bullets. I just bought one rifle the other day, and I said, "Oh, what about the bullets? Oh, we no more bullets." I said, "Then why am I buying the rifle for?"
yeah, Glenn, I just got off one meeting last night with Auntie Barbara Kalipi them and Gadzia Kaka, and we're talking about coordinating the hunts, yeah, in Ho'olehua. So like Godfrey them use like air rifles.
Right,
I think the slugs is way cheaper than bullet, and then air rifles are not regulated.
right.
So that might be the best way to go. And we talked about coordinating, with Justin them, Molokai Hunting Club, and then Kahikina's bow hunting club. But what they're doing right now, Pu'ukapele, Uncle Yama folks, they kind of have a crew that is, what they're doing is they're flushing the deer, they're coordinating the hunts to flush the deer out of the residences, and then
Mhm.
kill them. So we were talking about doing like having certain like po'o of different sectors of Hawaiian homes to lead the hunts, to flush the animals out of the residential area, and then kill them. But basically, the strategy has to be very coordinated because of how the deer moves, and they go from one safe place to another place, safe place. But I think that's what we're gonna have to do, like in the homestead area, and then also Manaloa, Kaluakoi side. We gotta get those populations down first, but we also gotta work Manae. At least Manae, we get some fencing, but they're coming down to the lower areas and won't just look like Kamalo, where it's denuded on the bottom of the fence. So we have to kind of really work on that coordination to bring the deer numbers down.
I just wanted to comment. I think we should make this available to everybody that is involved in this, so they can see what the discussion was all about. Because I think the sense of urgency cannot be overstated right now. Is gonna in right now get plenty rain, wind, and everything. In another month, they're gonna be looking for food again, and they're gonna be like right in there in the deep. I mean, they're gonna be right in there. I don't know if you noticed in Kanakakai, the county cleared all the side of the road by that old cornfield coming out of town, coming towards Hollywood area. And the reason why they did that is that a whole bunch of people ran into deer and wanted to sue Molokai Ranch. And so they're starting to do that. But I kind of understand how come the county getting involved, because now every time somebody run into deer, they can sue the person the deer came out of the bushes from. We run into problems. Then how we control them? Do we just go, scrape all the land and try to make barriers, or do we come up with more unified control and more coordinated island-wide control? Because all we're doing is going to push them into another area if we're not bringing the populations down.
Yeah, and Jonah is making notes, so we'll have notes and we'll have this video available for the island. But, and I really want to thank you, Uncle Saw. I mean, I was feeling that kaumaha, and anyway, we as islands can help each other. I want to see that happen. Yeah, but mahalo, everybody.
I think Saul, you brought up a really good point in that people get desensitized. They see them all around all the time, that becomes the norm, and that is not the norm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Malu, I don't know if you want to say anything on behalf of the Meyer lands, or if you think might have any interest of doing this work also.
Yeah, no, aloha everyone, and mahalo for letting me be here. So yeah, my name is Malo Castro. If you know Scott Meyer, that's my uncle, Scotty Meyer. And I'm here because I actually met Malia through. I'm a graduate student in Michigan, but I'm at the School of Sustainability and School of Environment and Sustainability with Kyle White. But this is kind of like the work I do here. I work with a lot of tribes on the continent, doing forest management and evaluation, like land-based education, anything around kind of sustainability and like education and management work. Because because I wanted to come home and come back to Hawaii and do this work. So I'm here as a young representative of my family. I'm actually going to be on the board of the Meyer Corporation and be able to work. We're really committed to facilitating as much access and like collaboration around, you know, managing this deer, or getting this population down to into the levels that it needs to be for the island to survive and thrive. So I'm here just to help facilitate that, so that the hunt clubs, whoever it is that we need to work with, we can get the conversations going, so we can kind of make that happen. Because we do have those 2,000 acres up on the Mauka lands, and the deer are destroying the lands up there. And we actually I just got an email from JC Sakugawa, who is our current leaser up there, who does ranching, and he had like 50 head of cattle. He lost like 50 head of cattle recently, just from kind of starvation and like lack of grass to eat. So I'm aware that as a family of landowners that we haven't necessarily been super active, or how do I say, present in doing this work. That's just the truth of it, right? There hasn't really been a Meyer doing some real good stewarding of the land for a long time. So I'm just thankful that y'all are willing to have me here, and I look forward to working for a long time here.
Hello, Malu. Justin, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I know the Molokai Hunting Club tries to work with large landowners. You got the Meyer here, Meyer Corporation here. I don't know if you want to work with them, but just any thoughts that you have from the discussion so far of what you heard.
Yes, aloha. We did send out an email out to the Myers through the Molokai Hunting Club and to a lot of the big landowners. Just offering ways of how we can help them reach their goals. So I honestly believe working with landowners as the hunting club, we do offer a lot. And for us, it's it can be challenging at time, because working with a lot of different landowners, people have a lot of different rules and regulations, which we try our best to accommodate, and we want to work with landowners. So we try our best. We really want to work with landowners. I do want to make a comment on Uncle Glenn's, an economic value of the deer. So for me personally, now this is just for me personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of the club. For me personally, if the deer itself was to be of an economic value for our island, I would honestly like to see something go back to our community. Something gotta come back to the community so we can educate our younger people about conservation itself. That's where it is. So if we're looking at the deer as an economic value, such as Jake Muse does it in Maui Nui venison, if that is a possible solution, we ourselves got to set it up where we can also have an educational program to educate and get it in the classroom, so our kids understand what a watershed is. They understand the value of it. They understand the terminologies, the plants, our native plants, on how to grow them. I'm aggressive. I want to plant more plants out in the forest. I don't like waiting. I want to grab native plants. I want to plant 1 million of them if I could. But that is what I'm talking about. We are here to help this island here heal itself. And if we have to plant native plants, then we need to find that economic means to help. So education to me is the key. If we're going to look at it from a deer as producing economic value, then I truly would want to have some funds back into the school system. So that's just based on me, though.
So not just
Justin, I think that's a really good idea. That's a really good model, because it cannot just be take, gotta be give. So no, I agree 100% on that one, Justin.
Okay, so we have to set up that economic model by which we have some kind of fund that goes to support conservation and education efforts.
And replanting. And replanting. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Any thoughts, Chris, from Sustainable Molokai before we end?
Um, the only thought I have, I guess, is to that last part of the conversation, which is how we set up the economic model and how we drive some of that profit back into education. And I've been involved in a lot of different types of organization formation. And so I think there is a space where a nonprofit like Sustainable Molokai could contribute like that education piece and be the and help facilitate the creation of the education piece and getting the funding for that, getting the funding to flow to that. But I'm also thinking about how we coordinate that effort with like the for-profit side. So how we work with the people who are going to be driving the model for that. So I'm still in the early stages. I'm still trying to process like how that would look. But I'm excited about that possibility and how we do that.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And then, Matt put this together, and I want to thank him. And there's a lot of wisdom and great experience that Matt can bring to the fore. So I'm not sure if Matt, you want to say anything before we adjourn.
Not really. As to processing, I think Malia, you and me have some whiteboarding sessions in our future.
Yeah.
But yeah, however I can help and be of service. I think I what feels where I can best support is in developing those kind of integrated economic models. So let's think about it some more, develop it. I'll try to come up with something more tangible.
And Matt is being kind of humble because the kind of work that he's doing, like this Albizia project, like he worked to after that hurricane that hit Hawaii Island hardest, and they said Albizia is a good for nothing wood. He created this project by which to actually process and manufacture Albizia to look as a prototype for green building. So there's this Albizia structure at UH that he piloted, and now they're in Manoa Valley, and they're swapping out Albizia with native trees and looking at milling that wood and actually making it a building material in Hawaii. And then you're at what is that place again, Matt?
Oh, Waikikua.
Yeah, so they're doing like, I think it's what, 30 years of native forestry. And Matt also has a banking background. So he looks at how do you do this sort of like community financing kind of structure. So yeah, I don't have the actual words because I'm not in that arena, but Matt can say better than I can. But I'm I've been pulling Matt into our discussions so that we can look at some of these economic structures that are really community based and bring that prosperity to our islands. So I want to say mahalo, Matt, for reaching out through your contacts to get Kirk to talk Starry with us. Really appreciate that.
For sure. I think Darren might also be really have some interesting perspectives on the economic development side as well. He's got a pretty incredible um, community of practice and like lived experience of work. So yeah, more
Wow.
soon.
Okay, gang. So thank you so much for being on this call, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle for Saul, for your wisdom too. Mm. Mahalo, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Aloha.
Hey, aloha.
Mahalo.
Uh,
Aloha.